Hello and welcome to our webinar on Experience HCI Without Compromise for Business Critical Apps and Mixed Workloads at Scale. Today's session is sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I am excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. In the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we are offering several resources. So I'd especially like to call your attention to two PDFs from HPE. There's an economic validation report from independent analysts at ESG about HPE's Nimble Storage dHCI. And there's an HCI report from the independent analysts at IDC. Two valuable resources there. Definitely check those out. Now, at the end of this webinar, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. You must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom, and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. To help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card. This card is for $50 and it's for the best question. So at the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and reach out to that prize winner later on this week. So with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Mark Kravitz. He's a hyperconverged solution business manager at HPE. So I am going to turn things over to Mark now.
All right, thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you may be joining us. My name is Mark Kravitz. I am a solution business manager with HPE, focusing on hyperconverged technologies. And I'm here to talk to you about probably one of the fastest growing products that we've ever brought to market in the storage portfolio, which is Alletra dHCI. A little bit background on myself. I've been with HPE about 12 years. I've been focusing on HCI technologies for about the past 8 years or so. And it's been very interesting to see kind of the growth and where we're going, how customers are adopting it. What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit around, our strategy at HPE with HCI, where we're seeing customers applying it, how they're really starting to now expand the use case to really incorporate a significantly more workloads that they've been able to do before and get a lot of the benefits around HCI. As you're going through, and if you have questions, we have people that are going to be monitoring that, so you'll be able to get answers to those Q&A, so definitely encourage you to do so. And with that, let's go over quickly the agenda. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategy, right, around how we're looking at HCI. And we'll talk a little bit about dHCI. We'll define it, where really the areas that it's focusing on. And then I'll talk about some of the reasons why customers are implementing this versus, a lot of the traditional HCI solutions that we're very comfortable with. Third, I'm actually going to show you our new cloud-based HCI management that we've actually gone live with towards the end of the next year, that focuses on a number of different things, but really looks at how do I simplify, both my infrastructure management as well as my virtual machine management, wherever those are running, whether they're on-prem within dHCI, or if the VMs are running actually within the public cloud. So true hybrid cloud and infrastructure management through that HCI-like experience. So I'll share with you a little bit about some things that where we're going with it, and then at the end, we'll be able to address some questions that come in during the session. So to kick it off, if you have been, if you have worked with HCI technologies, if you evaluated HCI technologies, I would say the goals, the number one goals of why customers have been implementing these, they really haven't changed over the last number of years. It's all around simplification, right? And these would be the three common things that we see. Not everything, but customers want to simplify the deployment process. They want to accelerate time to value, be able to drive more agility as they're deploying new infrastructure. They want that single pane of glass management, right? They want to enable generalists to be able to do more with less and not have to rely on a lot of specialists. And then they want to provide a very simple way is how to scale, right? So instead of having to have that initial capex outlay, of purchase of a SAN, it allows them to start very small and then grow in increments, right? So as their workloads, as their requirements increase, they can scale their environments linearly, so it's extremely predictable. And what we've seen is this works well for a number of different workloads, whether it's general purpose VMware. I think VDI is kind of that one workload that everybody kind of pairs with hyperconverged, right? So again, worked very well for those aspects. If we fast forward to today, what we're seeing is, our customers are getting very comfortable with hyperconverged. They're starting to say, well, if I can get those benefits, those HCI benefits for, my VDI, my general purpose VMware, why can't I expand that to more workloads, right? Why can't I start looking at more, workloads that were traditionally meant to run on SAN, whether it's, high-end databases that really need that low latency access to storage, right? And so what they're finding is, as they're starting to, add and scale their environments to accommodate these workloads, is they're having to make a lot of compromises, specifically around, I would say, storage aspects, right? It's the amount of resiliency, it's the amount of performance they require. It's forcing them to essentially over provision, right? And because that, traditional HCI appliance, right, compute and storage and kind of an x86 server node isn't very flexible, they're left with a significant amount of unused resources. And this is what's driving, what we're seeing is a really poor total cost of ownership and just significantly higher costs overall. So this is a very quick example that, we put together an analogy to kind of help understand, how does dHCI solve this problem, right? How do we enable the ability to virtualize and get the benefits of HCI for more workloads? And so the analogy I use is a shirt. And when I present this, if you've been to, IT trade shows, and I've done a number in the past, our HP Discover conference is coming up middle of the year. When I've gone to those in the past, you always get that kind of one size fits all shirt with the HP logo. And I can remember one time I attended an event and I tried on my shirt and it fit very well in the chest and the waist, but it was a little too short in the arm. So, the logical thought is, well, it means I need a bigger size. So that's what I did. I traded up, I got the bigger size, and I was able to fix that problem, right? That bigger size enabled me to get that perfect fit in the arm. But in doing that, I actually created two additional problems. The shirt was now a little bit too wide in the waist, and it was too long in the chest. And so, you're probably asking, well, what does this have to do with, my data center and HCI? Well, what this represents is that fundamental inflexibility that traditional HCI had, right? It assumed that storage and compute were all going to grow at the same rate. And just like people, we all know that data centers, they don't come in standard sizes. And when you can't scale compute and storage independently, that's what leads to a lot of waste. So if we get back to our example, right, customers that have HCI, right, they want to say, look, give me more workloads, right? Let's start bringing in, more of these, performance intensive workloads that were, generally meant to run on SAN, right? As they go to scale out and they go to solve the storage problem, again, we talked about they need, again, more of that resiliency, more of that performance. They're essentially forced to add compute resources that just go unutilized, right? Wasted resources. And if I have all this additional compute in my environment, you have to consider all of the additional drag that I get on top of that. Well, if I've got more servers, that means that's more rack space that I'm taking up. That means there's more licensing, right? More things like VMware application licensing and stuff like that isn't cheap. And this is what we're finding is driving, that those higher costs via this poor utilization. So this is the fundamental issue that we see customers that are implementing dHCI that it's solving, right? It gives them that HCI-like experience. And I'll talk a lot about how we're, simplifying the overall management experience. But because the back end of dHCI from a hardware perspective is disaggregated, right? It's built on separate compute and separate storage. It enables me to scale independently based on the resources that I need when I need them. So if I need storage resources, I can add performance, I can add capacity, but I'm not forced to add compute resources that are just going to go unutilized and I'm paying for them to just sit idle, right? If I need to go ahead and add an application on, say the next day, all I do is add that server, right? I add that server to the cluster, and I'll talk about how simple that process actually is, right? And I can bring on that application when I need it. Maybe the next day I have a different type of application, right? Something that requires a different server configuration. Well, I just bring that on when I need it, and I still get that overall HCI-like experience with the flexibility of converged infrastructure in the back end. Meaning at the end of the day, I get more of that custom fit, right? Like in my shirt, without having to pay that price tag. So dHCI, these are, I would say, the three pillars that really make dHCI very powerful. Like any HCI solution, it is very simple. And I'm going to go over, some of those aspects of it. But if you're familiar with our HPE storage line, specifically with technologies like InfoSight, that really takes that experience to the next level. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Because we are based on SAN technology, right? Our Alletra storage arrays are powering dHCI. We get to take all of those features and functionalities, whether it's that no single point of failure, that 6 nines of availability, or the ability to drive sub-millisecond latency, things that more performance intensive workloads need. We're able to now deliver all different types of workloads and allow customers to get the benefit of HCI. And then we talked about the ability to scale compute and storage independently, right? We're not forcing customers to add resources that they don't need that are just going to sit idle and unused. So just like any hyperconverged solution, dHCI is driving simplicity, and that starts directly at implementation. So, just like majority of HCI solutions, there's a lot of work that's done in the factory. So once the gear comes on site, it's racked and cabled. It's a very quick deployment process, so I'm able to accelerate that time to value. And then once it's complete, everything is managed through vCenter, right? So if you are a user that spends their day in vCenter, you're basically 100% trained on how to use dHCI, right? It allows them to manage their VMs just like they normally would. And all of the complexity around provisioning storage, right, is all taken care of under the covers. For example, if I'm utilizing things like technologies like vVols, it is eliminating LUN provisioning altogether and allowing me to just set up policies and apply those, specific data services to my VM at a very simple way, whether that's configuring replication, configuring snapshots, and so on and so forth. And then we get into the aspects of lifecycle management. This is where dHCI is very powerful, right? We talked about the flexible scalability of dHCI, but it's even simpler than that. When I need to, for instance, add a compute node to my cluster, it's as simple as putting that node on the network. dHCI is auto-discovering that, and literally within a few clicks, it's adding those resources to the cluster non-disruptively. And the aspect I would say that is extremely beneficial to customers that I've seen is how we simplify the upgrade process. I'd say in my history, this is a very complex process that customers have had, not just complex, but the amount of time sometimes it can take. And dHCI directly solves this with our single-click upgrade capability. It allows customers to download the updates as a package, right? And those are packages for the entire appliance, meaning all of my firmware updates, all of my updates to my hypervisor, anything from my storage array, and non-disruptively with a single click, it's able to execute those upgrades, those upgrades without all of the complexity. So very simple. And then if you're familiar with InfoSight, this is really a big piece in how we use advanced analytics and automation to be able to drive simplicity around all of the support aspects, to be able to predict and prevent problems before they occur. And what I would say is this is a very big part of dHCI. So if you're familiar with using InfoSight, say on our storage line, on our compute line, very similar. But when we apply these aspects of to dHCI, it's across the full VM stack. Meaning, say there was a VM that was running slow, and I needed to understand where the root cause was. If I wasn't using dHCI, I might have to go into a number of different components, whether it's to find the latency, right? Whether it's across my host, it's somewhere on my SAN. InfoSight not only is going to proactively tell us where those issues are, but it's going to give us the directions that on what we need to be able to solve it. So very predictive aspects across the full VM stack. And the other nice piece of this is how InfoSight provides these benefits into support. All level 1 and level 2 issues are automatically discovered via InfoSight, cases automatically opened and solved a lot of times before customers even know there's an issue. In fact, when you're calling in to us for support on dHCI, you're getting automatically routed to a level 3 engineer, and they're supporting dHCI as a solution stack. I mean, I'm getting that true single back to pat for all aspects of my appliance, as well as my integration into VMware. Meaning if there happens to be a problem with VMware, we're going to still take that first call, but we're going to do all the coordination on the back end, meaning you're not going to have to coordinate with multiple vendors to be able to understand where the problem is. So very simple aspect, right, to be able to treat this like a true HCI appliance. And the other aspect we talked about is really, that differentiates us from traditional HCI solutions is, again, because we are powered by our Alletra array, we're able to take all of those features, whether it's that guaranteed 6 nines of availability, sub-millisecond latency, all of the data services that customers like to run, like data reduction, whether it's deduplication or encryption, services like that. We're able to run those on our Alletra platform and not have any impact on performance, right? And I know this is a challenge that traditional HCI has struggled with, meaning that HCI tax, right? When I turn on certain services like dedupe and compression, we can do it, but it's going to cause a performance issue within my environment. We don't have that with dHCI, right? Because we have the foundation of Alletra, we can allow all of those services to run on our Alletra array, meaning at the end of the day, we're dedicating our CPU power to our applications to be able to drive better application performance. And that's why this is a phenomenal platform to be able to expand the amount of workloads that I want to be able to run in an HCI environment. In fact, what we feel really proud about is IDC has actually published a report around the middle of last year that essentially validated the strategy. What they were finding was a lot of customers are now moving mission critical workloads now to HCI. Number one is there are now disaggregated solutions, and they specifically called our HPE Alletra dHCI as a solution out, where again I can add separate compute and storage resources only when I need it. And the other piece that they found was, customers had been hesitant in the past to add in mission critical workloads to HCI because they lacked a lot of the storage features, whether it's not providing enough security, whether they can't meet the availability requirements. dHCI addresses these concerns, right? It allows customers to really expand the amount of workloads now that I can get the benefit of HCI. So we've actually provided a copy of this paper. So if you're interested in looking at it, you'll be able to download it directly through the webinar tool. But I highly recommend looking at where the industry is seeing a lot of technology go with HCI. All right, so now we talked a little bit about the solution, right? We understand kind of where the focus is. Why are customers implementing this over traditional HCI, right? What are some of those advantages over a lot of the solutions that are very common in the market? And the first one we've actually already talked about a lot, but I want to go over it again because it's just extremely important and a real focus area with dHCI, right? It's traditional HCI solutions. The challenge they've had is they've struggled to support things like databases or applications that need low latency access to storage, right? In a traditional environment, that traditional HCI, I should say, the entire solution is only as strong as the weakest node, right? This is because as data is spread across a cluster, if a node becomes slow, it's going to impact the entire solution, right? Likewise, if I have a drive or a component failure, it's going to have a direct impact on performance. Because dHCI is built on our all-flash technology, which is, again, an option that we have for this, it allows us to sustain multiple failures without suffering any degradation of performance, even when I might be updating software on the dHCI array. In fact, what we've seen in some of our comparisons is dHCI is actually providing about a 10x improvement in write latency. And what the result is customers can virtualize more workloads, right? The most complex demanding workloads, whether it's large scale repositories, high-end databases, they can now get the simplification of management that HCI provides that they didn't think was possible before. The next piece that's important, or a big differentiator, is around availability, right? And this is very key if we're talking about, enterprise level workloads that require that, that high-end 6 nines of availability. And the way to think about this, and if you've architected HCI solutions in the past, a term that is brought up is called FTT, meaning failures to tolerate, right? Which means, how many failures can I tolerate in my environment before I'm at risk of suffering data loss or VM availability? So if you've architected HCI solutions in the past, that kind of that entry level configuration of HA is what is called FTT1, meaning, it's a 3-node configuration, and I can only protect against a single drive failure before I'm at risk for data loss, right? This is something that, if we're talking about enterprise level applications, probably not a recommendation that we would ever have to be able to run those types of workloads. So in order to get more of that higher level of availability, what is called FTT2, it requires customers to essentially double the amount of infrastructure in a traditional HCI solution. So this would get me up to the ability to protect against 2 drive failures. Now, the only thing to consider within this configuration is if I was taking a node down to, say, do an update, or say it went offline for some reason, I would be back to that FTT1 level, meaning I could then only protect against a single drive failure. Now, to get into that level that most enterprise applications need, that's when we're talking about FTT3, meaning I can sustain three simultaneous drive failures, right? Now, as I said, this is probably that main level that most organizations that are looking at high-end applications are going to be configuring, right? When I compare this against dHCI can actually provide this level of availability, but we do it in our smallest configuration, which is a single Alletra array and 2 ProLiant nodes, right? In fact, what you've seen here, this scenario that I put out on this slide, I'm assuming the same workload running on all 4 of these options, but as you can see, dHCI is taking up a fraction of the infrastructure, which means it's a fraction of the cost to be able to support this level of availability. So, so this is a very key differentiator, right, in our ability to provide that highest level of availability that the mission critical workloads require, right, within HCI, but we're doing it at a very small footprint, meaning at a significantly lower cost. Now, another big advantage, and I kind of talked about this today, already is our ability to run things like data reduction technologies and not have to compromise. We're not going to have that HCI tax when I need to run things like dedupe and compression. So this is a quick comparison. We had a scenario with one of our customers that had a requirement for 95 terabytes. And when we looked at architecting with a traditional HCI environment, you can see what it took, right? 17 nodes to be able to hit that storage requirement. When we compared it against dHCI, you can notice it required now 360 fewer SSDs to get equivalent protection and the same amount of capacity. And this is because we can run all of our reduction capabilities, right? And we don't have to make any types of compromises, right? And all of this has an impact on cost, right? Not having that HCI tax means that our CPUs are running almost a third more efficient to be able to drive application performance. Customers are getting a significant amount of storage efficiency. And because I have less infrastructure, that means I've got significantly less servers to support, less maintenance that I'm paying for, less virtualization licenses, and on and on and on, meaning I'm getting a very attractive total cost of ownership. In fact, our customers were so shocked at how much less dHCI was when they compared it against traditional HCI solutions. We actually went and worked with a third party to do an independent validation of this model. And so what we did is we contracted with ESG. They ran a model of 121 mixed workload virtual machines on dHCI, and they compared that to traditional HCI solutions, and you can see what the results were. And if you notice, there's a sliding scale as I go up the graph from right to left, right? And if you think back to what we talked about, high availability and FTT, traditional HCI solutions, as you go to those higher levels requirements of availability, it requires more infrastructure. Well, that obviously comes at a cost. So if we compare dHCI at an apples to apples comparison to traditional HCI, say at a FTT3 level, we're driving almost a 65% cost savings, so up to 2.5x lower total cost of ownership for dHCI, right? If you consider the fact that, again, if I need less infrastructure, that means that's less support and maintenance that I'm paying for, less power and cooling and resources on my floor, less software licensing, and on and on and on. So this is another paper that I provided as a download. So if you're interested in understanding, how customers are achieving these types of cost savings, definitely encourage you to go ahead and download this paper. Wanted to share a quick example of a customer, right? So this is a customer that was actually deploying multiple different clusters of traditional HCI, and they were getting to a point where the compromise that they were having to make to get performance at peak performance at a certain level, the cost was starting to get unbearable. And so what we did is we talked to this customer about dHCI, and what they found was really three main advantages that they were able to benefit from, right? Number one, when we looked at their SQL workloads, right, in terms of what it would take to run on a dHCI environment, we were able to reduce their server footprint in half. So going from 8 down to 4 servers, right, within a dHCI model. Secondly, is the amount of better performance that they were able to find for their database workloads, right? So they actually ran a comparison of their workloads running on dHCI versus the competitor, and it wasn't even an apples to apples comparison. The competitor was an all NVMe. They had 20% more CPU and double the RAM versus our dHCI all flash solution. And the results were pretty shocking. They were able to see a 40% reduction in latency when they ran their workloads on dHCI versus the traditional environment. Right? And the last advantage was, again, it now freed them up to run data reduction technologies like dedupe and compression, and it allowed them to have now achieved a 7x capacity savings, meaning they had less physical storage that they had to go ahead and pay for. So, and what I would say is this example is very similar to a lot of the customers that we work with, right? These are a lot of the benefits that they are getting are very similar in terms of this example that I just shared. So I wanted to show a little bit on the hardware, what it actually looks like and what the flexibility that customers have when they build dHCI solutions, right? So where we start is from a networking perspective. So we require two top-of-rack switches. And the good thing here is you can get them from us, right? And we have a lot of different options, whether it's our M series line, whether it's Flex Fabric, even with Aruba, you can get those from us. But again, if you have a switch, a networking vendor that is deeply integrated in your environment, we do work with third-party vendors, right? So we give you flexibility there. After that, there is a management component from software. There is, again, dHCI. All of these software is preloaded in the factory. One update on this slide, we actually now are supporting vSphere 8. So that is a new option. So again, just we work very closely with VMware to make sure that we are up to date on all new releases and patches that come up, right? So that is available as well. And then once we get down to the compute layer, we just use best of breed normal HPE ProLiant servers. So both the latest and greatest from AMD as well as Intel are available. We are working on our Gen 11 launch, and our Gen 11 servers, if you've been following us closely, is out in the market, and dHCI will be able to support those at some point as well. So that is coming. So a lot of flexibility in terms of the amount, what type of compute I want to configure within dHCI. And then after that, from a storage perspective, again, we support right now our legacy Nimble as well as our next gen Alletra, both our 6000, which is our all-in NVMe, as well as our new Alletra 5000, which was released towards the end of last year, which is our hybrid model. Okay, so as you see, again, a lot of flexibility in terms of how I can build HCI, really more like traditional infrastructure, right? Traditional converged infrastructure, but again, I'm getting all of the simplicity, as we talked about, of HCI to be able to manage it through that single pane of glass. All right, so moving along, want to talk about some announcements we had around Discover last year, right? So if you've been following HCI or HPE for a while, we've been, very a big part of where we're going is our HPE GreenLake cloud platform, right? The ability to deliver, and consume our offerings as a service. Has been able to provide customers with a lot of flexibility in terms of helping them transition more to that OpEx model. And so, in our storage business unit, we've definitely been very proactive on that in delivering more offerings. And one of them that we announced at our Discover conference last year was GreenLake for HCI, meaning it allows customers, really, I would say 3 different areas. It vastly simplifies the ordering process, and instead of going through, complex configurations, it allows customers to be able to really configure solutions based on the workload requirements, right? After that, everything is managed, is consumed as a subscription service with a buffer, meaning that I get my capacity, I'm paying for it on a monthly basis, and then I have capacity on demand that's available, meaning if I need to be able to have to bring on an application for a critical type of project, I have that capacity already here that I just turn on, and I'm only paying for that additional capacity as I use it, right? So this is an offering that we announced. We expect it to go live, within 2023. But the big piece that goes with this is we've launched a new cloud-based management solution that is actually live and available now for dHCI customers, that allows them to manage both their infrastructure as well as their virtual machines, whether their VMs are running on dHCI or if they're running in the public cloud through a single interface, right? And I'd like to actually give you a sneak preview into what that is, right? Into some of the innovation that we're driving with HCI. So I'm actually going to bring up this new cloud-based HCI management console that, as I mentioned, is now available for all dHCI customers, right? So if you look here, this is my main dashboard that gives me kind of that high-level view of my virtual machines. You can see I've got only got 24 VMs that are actually running within HCI. I've got a number running in private cloud, meaning there's 22 that are running on various dHCI systems, right? I've got 3 here that are being run. And then I've got a couple virtual machines that are being run in the public cloud. And initially, this is on AWS. That's what we are supporting at launch. But we are planning on bringing on additional cloud providers in the future. I can get a good understanding of those HCI systems of the utilization I have. So if I hover over this box, I can see one of my dHCI clusters. I can get a good understanding of its CPU utilization, the memory, what VMs are running on it, and I can click on these to be able to dig deeper into what's really going on that physical cluster. I can get all the traditional VM metrics of all my virtual machines, whether it's I/O or latency. And again, I can click on certain VMs to get a deeper dive. And then I can get a good understanding of the capacity that's running in my HCI systems, right? So I've got 3 HCI systems that I mentioned. You see all 3 have, again, not a lot of virtual machines in my demo environment that are provisioned right now on those. So again, I'm looking really good at capacity. And then I can also get a good understanding of my VMs by capacity as well. So looks like I've got a few VMs here that are running pretty close. And if I needed to dig deeper, again, I can click on those and look into what's going on with my virtual machines. In addition, I can start getting an understanding of what type of data protection I have. And one of the neat things around our strategy is HP Storage has a number of different data services solutions that I can also license via subscription. One we also announced is our backup and recovery solution that provides a really nice integration to be able to provide data protection to my virtual machines that simple data protection to my virtual machines that I'm creating directly within my HCI application. So this gives me an understanding of my data protection aspect on my VMs running. And then I can also get a good understanding as far as the health of the environment. So once a day, we are going to run a configuration check against best practices, and it's going to give me an understanding of what areas have failed within the environment, so I can go ahead and dig deeper and proactively solve those issues. So I'm going to go a little bit into the infrastructure, right? And then I'll talk about how simple it is to be able to manage my virtual machine. So one of the really nice things about this is we've taken all of the things that are great about dHCI, things like our single click upgrade, and we've applied those to this application, right? So if I needed to say run an upgrade directly for my clusters, I can do that directly here, right? If there was an update available, and again, I'm at the latest level, so I can't show you that, but these buttons would be active. I would click on these to see what updates I can download, are available. It would then run a pre-check right on it, and then non-disruptively, it would go ahead and upgrade the entire cluster. What's really neat about this, if say I was running multiple dHCI systems, I could check both of these boxes at the same time and actually coordinate those upgrades at the same time, right? So a concept we have now called parallel upgrades, meaning if I've got dHCI at multiple sites, I can go ahead and kick those upgrades off through this single interface and all at the same time. And again, that's going to be done non-disruptively, right? So again, really solving a key problem that we know that our customers have had about keeping our clusters at that right level, right? And then I can do a number of different things also here. So if I needed to be able to migrate data stores or virtual machines between clusters, I have the ability to do that here, as well as if I need to be able to run the configuration checks against clusters, I can do those as well. And if I dig a little bit deeper, again, I can get a lot of good information here about what's running on my clusters, from networking to storage to compute to my virtual machines that are running on it. I can do a number of VM type of activities on my cluster, whether it's powering them off, powering them on. Again, I'm not going to be able to do everything I do in vCenter, but say, for example, I had that IT generalist that wasn't really skilled in all of these. I can really do a lot of my day-to-day work directly within this and not having to have all of that domain knowledge of managing complex virtualization and storage arrays. Now, one of the really nice aspects is how simple it is to provision virtual machines now, right? And this is really where we're bringing in that cloud-based type of aspects and how simple it is to run this environment. So literally, we have gotten the ability to provision VMs down to 5 steps. All I need to do is I click on this plus sign here to create a virtual machine. I go ahead and enter a name in. I go to click on next. It brings in the hypervisor clusters I want to go ahead and provision it on. So as we had said, I've got 3 dHCI clusters that are running. I click next. I can preset my OS template on here, and all I would do is click on that, on what operating system I wanted on that VM, and then I would go ahead and select my policies. And what is really neat is these would essentially set up all of the characteristics of that VM, whether I wanted deduplication enabled, whether I needed all flash performance, whether I needed encryption enabled, and then what the protection policy is. And I'll show you a little bit more about the various ways that we can do data protection within this. So I would click on a policy that I would preset. I click next, and that's it. Literally, I've gone through 5 steps, and I'm going in and I'm creating that virtual machine. So I've submitted that task. That VM is going to go ahead and kick off, right? Right, again, so very simple process. And we've also added that ability in the public cloud, right? So if I clicked on my public cloud box right there, I'm going to get a very similar screen, right? Where I enter in a name. Here I have my provider, right? So my provider here is AWS. Again, when eventually you might have the option for additional cloud providers here. I then start entering in my account information for AWS, and I go through a lot of the similar process, right? So literally directly through this screen, I can provision both on-prem and off-prem virtual machines through this single interface. Now, we talked a little bit about the provisioning policies, right, for VM. So these are the things that I can go ahead and preset, right? So these are all of the policies that I already have within my environment. It's very simple to be able to add them. So if I wanted to say add a policy, all I need to do is name it. I can give a little bit of information. I can click a couple boxes on what services I want to enable, whether it's deduplication, what my QoS performance would be. And then I would go ahead and set my protection policy, right? And this is very interesting in terms of where these are coming from. So these are all the protection policies that are defined in my backup and recovery application, right? And as you see here, I've got a few backup policies here that are already defined. I can actually click on these if I wanted to go ahead and look. So I'm going to take a quick detour into my backup and recovery application, and I can look a little bit about this policy. Actually, as I see that policy wasn't working, but look at all of these would be an example of all of the policies that I have defined in backup and recovery. So I can define my local snapshots. I can define my premise, if I'm protecting that virtual machine on-prem, as well as if I want to go ahead and protect that VM directly within AWS, right? And so once I define those policies, I can easily apply those to my VMs as I'm creating them through, what we like to call our VM vending engine. So as I mentioned, again, this capability is live now. This is available for all dHCI customers, and it's going to come standard once we launch our GreenLake for HCI solution that will be coming later in 2022. All right. So what do you do next, right? What if, what are some of the things I would recommend if you want to learn a little bit, do a little bit more with HPE? One of the tools that is very popular for our customers, right, as they're going through the sales cycle is HPE Cloud Physics, right? This is a SaaS offering that we've launched within the last year that provides very simple remote agentless software that gathers a significant amount of metrics out of my virtualization environment and allows us to be able to provide better decisions on my next steps, whether I'm making a purchase in terms of a refresh, whether I want to be able to understand where workloads are going to run the best. It allows me to really make my decisions off of direct data within my environment. So once I get Cloud Physics running and I want to understand what's going on in my environment, this is an example of all of the different metrics that I can get information on, right? So I can see things about what's going on within my virtual machine. So for example, Maybe if I was over licensed on a number of hosts, I would be able to get that information, right? So I could say, better optimize my licensing strategy. If I had data stores that were overutilized and I wanted to be able to better optimize the space, those are types of information that I would get a good understanding on. And then I can get a lot of things around my infrastructure, right? In terms of my storage, my compute, are there any contentions within my environment? This is where if I was say in the midst of doing an infrastructure refresh and I wanted to say, look, based on these virtual machines, if I was going to say run these in a dHCI solution, what would that look like? What would those actual requirements be? So we have this concept of cards within the environment that if I click on this, it would bring up the actual dHCI requirements that I would need in an infrastructure refresh, and that's what we would use to essentially right size and build a solution for you. And then lastly, again, if I was looking at a number of different use cases, things like moving workloads into the cloud, and I wanted to understand what the different costs might be for a lot of the various providers out there. Again, I can simulate a lot of those types of aspects on various cloud providers. Right. So again, a number of different use cases. This works really well for, whether I'm looking at a migration, looking at, certain workloads and moving them back and forth. Do they run better on-prem? It's going to really help me with that. It's going to understand if I'm doing an infrastructure refresh, where do my workloads run the best? Again, really allowing you to make decisions based on the actual data and requirements that I have right now for my virtual machines. And the great thing about this technology is it's free, right? So if you want to be able to run an assessment, all you need to do is reach out to your HPE representative, reach out to your channel partner, and we can get you started with Cloud Physics. So before I end, I just wanted to give a quick announcement to remind everybody about HPE Discover. Again, this is our annual conference that we have running. Get a lot of great information in terms of our strategy, what's new and great about HPE. This is something that's coming soon, as you see, July 20th to 22nd out in Las Vegas. And registration is now open. So I definitely encourage you, if you haven't been to Discover yet, it is a great experience. I've had the pleasure of being able to go a number of different times. But again, all you need to do is click on this link to go ahead and register. Or if you have any questions, again, I encourage you to talk to your HPE account representative. And with that, I can open it up now. We can look at the Q&A that's come into the system. As just a reminder, again, Cloud Physics, definitely encourage you as a next step to look at that, to get into that if you're doing any type of virtualization initiative. Or if you have any questions, I have my email address there, mark.kravitz@hpe.com. Feel free to reach out, right? And any questions on dHCI or the technology, we'd be happy to get back to you. And with that, we can start looking into the Q&A that we had that has come in through the portal.
All right, great presentation, Mark. Really appreciate that, and I promise everybody I'll bring that slide back up with Mark's email so you can get a hold of him, after the session. But before we get into the Q&A, I did want to throw up a poll here just about additional information you'd like about the HPE solution, so you can see the options there. And people are already starting to click on those. We really do appreciate it when you let us know what other information you'd like to see. So, Mark, I'm going to leave that poll up there while we take the first couple of questions. And the first one I've got for you is, is this really an HCI solution? It appears to be more of a converged platform.
Yeah, so this is probably one of the most common questions I get, specifically if a customer is talking with multiple competitors. But if you go off the definition of what true hyperconverged is, then no, it's not. But the way I would respond to it, and I think I talked about this earlier in the presentation, is I feel like we address the best of both worlds, or bring that to the table, right? We give customers the HCI-like experience. We showed how I can manage my environment through a single pane of glass, but we give the customers more flexibility to essentially build it more like converged infrastructure instead of being limited by the amount of components, give a lot more flexibility as far as being able to scale. So I feel like it yes, it's not that by definition, but I feel like it addresses some areas in the market where we've seen the traditional HCI has some difficulty addressing.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I wonder, sort of along the same lines, if you can talk a little bit more about the setup. It looks more complicated than typical HCI solutions. How is it set up? How is it different?
Yeah, so I mean I would say, from an experience perspective, it is going to setup is going to run pretty similar to how a traditional HCI solution works. The only difference is, we're going to have obviously separate components. There might be a little bit more. Obviously, I've got to rack a little bit more components into the rack and a little bit more cabling. But after that, all of the intelligence as far as to enable rapid deployment are in HCI. And I didn't go into the setup. There's some screens in the setup wizard for the demo that I did that actually show how we've basically standardized this into templates and made it really easy as far as just a point and click to be able to do the installation. So, so that really functions pretty closely to how a standard HCI solution would work. In fact, there are some additional value adds that we've done right on top of that. For example, certain lines of switching right from our HPE Aruba line actually enable network automation, meaning when you are doing deployment, if you're deploying with certain switches, it automates a number of tasks around, VLAN tagging and a lot of those network tasks that a lot of times are very cumbersome. So there is a lot of value add in the technology as far as really simplifying that deployment and enabling customers to accelerate that time to value.
Okay. All right. Super. Makes sense. Got a couple of questions here from Don about VMware. And Don's first question is, what is the time to market for VMware patches to make it to the HPE dHCI release?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The way I would answer that is, as far as the single click upgrade, right? I had mentioned the way that we publish our upgrades are via catalog. So we don't have an SLA behind that says we'll have this up at a certain time. Okay, but there's no reason that you can't go and VMware puts a patch out that you can't go and just go ahead and apply that, right? So we'll give you that flexibility, right? So if there is a critical patch, you don't need to wait for us to publish a catalog. You can just go ahead and go into the environment and apply that patch when it's available.
Okay. All right. Great. And then let me ask the other question that Don had, which is the VMware component licensed via the HPE support, or is it separate? And can it be part of our VMware EA?
That's another great question. So again, we give you flexibility there. So you could buy VMware OEM licensing from us, right? We're probably one of the number one providers of VMware in the world. So that is available. But again, if you already do have an ELA, and we know a lot of our customers already do, you are essentially, when you go through the deployment process, there'll be an entry point to be able to just put your license keys in. So again, you get all the software, all of it's pre-installed, and then once you get to deployment, you have flexibility in terms of how the license keys, again, you can get them from us, or you can bring them from your ELA.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And I do just also want to mention to anybody who hasn't been kind of monitoring the chat all through the presentation, Mark answered a ton of questions sort of in the background. So there are a lot of answers in there. So, be sure to sort of scroll through those. We've got a question here from Brian, asking what's the cost to add storage, but not CPU or RAM. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how you upgrade the system, maybe without getting into too much detail about cost, just like, do you have to go up by, modules at a time that are all three at once, or is it flexible in terms of, going out in different directions in terms of scale?
Yeah. So as far as adding compute, right? That the cost of compute is the same as just adding a typical Reliant server, right? So this is nothing, as I mentioned, the compute nodes are essentially standard, Intel, AMD, or DL380s or 365 or 325 models. So whatever the cost you would have as far as buying standalone compute and the subcomponents, it's essentially the same with dHCI. The only difference is we do a little bit more work in the factory, but from a pricing standpoint, it's pretty much the same. And I would say that applies pretty similar to the storage as well. It's essentially the similar cost as far as if I was, adding components, whether it's, performance or capacity. It's pretty much the same as if I was just purchasing standalone storage.
Okay, gotcha. And by the way, just put the slide back up for that HPE Discover 2023, which is June 20 to 22nd. And I believe you can click right on. Oh no, it's you'll need to copy over that URL, but it's discover.hpe.com if you're interested in finding out more about that. And I guess Mark, just as a sort of closing question, any suggestions as far as next steps for people, to learn more about HPE's dHCI?
Yeah, obviously you can go to hp.com. We have more information there. I would suggest if you have your HP account rep, I would definitely reach out to them. As I mentioned, cloud physics is just a great capability. The amount of data, if you're considering an infrastructure refresh, or just want to understand how can I better optimize my VMware environment, it's a zero cost offering, right, that we can bring to you. So I would definitely take advantage of that. Reach out to your account rep if you have questions on who to go to. Again, you had provided my email before. Feel free to reach out to me, and we can make sure that we map you up with the right HP account representative.
Okay, great. Yeah, and Mark's email is back up on screen for you, mark.kravitz@hpe.com. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Informative presentation, all the insights in the Q&A. Can't thank you enough.
Yep. Well, thanks to you, everybody, and hope everybody has a great rest of their week.
All right. And before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that gift card today is David Sieg from California. So congratulations to David Sieg. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I wanted to thank Hewlett Packard Enterprise for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions today. That concludes this event. Have a great rest of your day.